it seems as though the group came in about at Max Harbor, which is right at South Avenue and Elm Street in Stratford, and they established the first town there. That town, they put up a meeting house, and Adam Blakeman gave its first services there. And that went on for a few years when they decided to move to a newer and larger location. The early burying ground was in that area, but has not been discovered. It's just disintegrated and gone. But the town grew from that area. It was plotted and laid out by Adam Blakeman, and the different people were given plots of land for their houses. Adam Blakeman's wife was Moses Wheeler's sister. And again, apparently they were married over in England. However, Moses Wheeler shows up in 1638 in Milford, Connecticut. So again, that may have been another drawing crowd and drawing reason to it. I think there's a terrific amount of research that can be found. You just have to know where to start. And you could start off with Thomas Hooker. You probably find something in there. You could find John Eliot's early writings. And you can go back to Little Bordeaux and the church there. When we went in, our group, we were about 20 of us, spent all the afternoon in the church, and the Scottish minister gave us a lecture on this background and what it meant and so on. And much to my almost horror, we asked us to come up and look at the altar. I looked down, and the big tombstone on the floor that I was standing over was Tomlinson. So it's obvious that the same Stratford families came from that area, tied together by Thomas Hooker, John Eliot, Adam Blakeman, and the bunch that were there. Now, of course, Roger Williams went off on his own, John Winthrop went off on his own, and they split after they got here. But for, say, 10 or 15 years, they were closely allied in Little Bordeaux in England.
Well, that is a very interesting narrative. I remember that you told me you saw the Adam Blakeman signature and you were asked to be the lector in a church service. Does that tie in with...
The same things. We went to Oxford, and they got out the register, and Adam Blakeman signed when he got his degree there.
1617,
yeah,
I believe.
He was born in 1593, and about 1617 when he got his degree. In Nazing, they invited us, all in, of course, to the church on Sunday. They set the day aside for us. And we had a special commemorative service. And they asked me if I would read the lectern reading. So, of course, I was delighted to do it. And I almost fell off the lectern because you had to go up 4 stairs on one side and down 3 on the other, and it didn't even out.
I can't help but think you sort of felt at home with a Tomlinson
we saw everything.
tombstone and everything.
We saw everything. So they took us around the Nazing Church. There wasn't very much in it. There were a couple of Curtis stones. But in their mind, the Curtis family was just another parishioner. Well, when the society started, must have been about 20 years ago, Richmond Curtis of Leeds Island was the secretary, he was the president, went over and made friends with the rector and invited him over, and he came here and visited. And they began to see the connection between the Curtises there and here. And as a result, our society has made several gifts to the Nazing Church. And one of the big ones was a plaque, which we took over, or sent over, and had put up for our visit. It said, in memory of John and Elizabeth Hutchins Curtis, who left this church to come to America. The vestry took several votes to decide the phraseology on the marker and the size of it, which was par, and we paid for it, and the rector arranged to have it installed when we came. So when we got there, when you came in the main door, which is about in the middle of the church, you faced right into this big plaque in memory of John and Elizabeth Curtis, which was very nice. The altar and the church part, you turned to the right and went forward, and in the back was more seating. It's a big church. It was damaged quite badly during the World War II. The German bombers bombed it, and even today, many bomb shells are in the building itself. And they decided to repair it by plastering and cementing around it. So you see the building fixed up, but these shells sticking out. It's really quite impressive.
What a splendid occasion.
It really is fascinating. And
Still on the tape?
I'm not sure whether...
Val, thank you very much. I'm interested in that school, being an old school teacher. What do you think the school at Cuckoo House, whom do you think it taught, and what did they teach? Did they prepare ministers? Did it teach young children? Can you tell anything about it?
To what we saw there and heard, it was apparently for the sole purpose getting enough money to support John Eliot and Thomas Hooker.
Oh, it was their livelihood.
It was their livelihood.
I see.
So it would be presumed that it was a general school, grade school. Of course, a lot of the families that have been disenfranchised and kicked out were intellectuals, some religious, and the kids apparently had capabilities. So I mean, it wasn't a poor lower mental school. It was a above average school, which of course the Boston Latin School turned into. It was built in this old Tudor house, stucco. Downstairs were 4 rooms, and upstairs were 4.
It still exists, does it?
Still exists, and it was quite interesting. A pair of doctors have bought it, and they have 2 children, a boy and a girl. And they decided that the house didn't look right. The north side of it was full of what is known as wadding. It is a funny material. It isn't plaster. It's just straw and everything put on.
Is there another name for it? Wattle?
Wattle.
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 Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it looks funny was that the side of the house had these beautiful Tudor beams in the windows and everything, tiny glass in it, and the whole north side of the house was just blocked off. So the family went to work on it. They got good carpenters, and they discovered as they took the wadding out that they came down into the Tudor beams. And they discovered there's a whole row of windows in the north side of the house where they were able to restore. and get back to the 1600s. And so they've done quite a lot of restoration on the house to bring it back to the way it was back in the 1630s. They were very generous. The male doctor had to go into the office, but the woman stayed home, gave us all tea, and when you have a busload of people, that's quite a problem. And she allowed us to use her bathroom, which everybody wanted. But she took us through the house entirely. We saw it. We saw what they had done. She told us. And it seems that the minister from Little Bordeaux had been over to Boston or Roxbury Latin School and had talked to the headmaster there about this family living in Cuckoo House. And they arranged the transfer of the boy, who was then around 12, to come to Boston and go 4 years to Boston Latin School free. And so he was over there. He's probably just about back now.
Oh, good.
They thought it would help if he had an American private school education to start off to compare with the English people.
Well, probably at Roxbury Latin he got education quite comparable to what he would get in the English private school, or public school, as the private school is called.
Yeah. No, it was an interesting tie-in. And that's why I say I think it's a matter of digging. But I think I've seen a couple of good big books on Thomas Hooker right in the Stratford Library. I think we can start right there.
Is it quite certain that Adam Blakeman taught at that Cuckoo House school?
It looks very much like it. I can't guarantee it, though. But I think he was one of the instructors. I think they may have had, we'll say, 15 or 20 kids. And they needed educated people who could teach them.
But John Elliott was the
founder and director.
I see.
And Thomas Hooker was the collector of the fees.
Uh-huh.
And they ran the school while it was in existence there.
They couldn't have been there too long,
No.
actually, because they were heading.
They were heading for America.
Quite quickly.
No, I'd say 1625 may have been about when it started, and by 1635 they were gone.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of less than 10 years.
Yes.
But it's the combination of people that get me, because you look at the list of the people that came over on the Lion, and it's the very foundation of America.
Well, that was the nucleus for the founding fathers.
Founding fathers.
Of the New England area, certainly.
Well, I mean, even Roger Williams,
Yes.
left footer, he had a big influence on religion in the United States.
Indeed,
And of course, the Adams had the intellectual background. And it really is, as you go through that list of names, and one of the things that has come up in Braintree at the time was a family by the name of Bush. They just discovered that. So again, the same thing. Apparently his family was kicked out. See what they were doing. They were trying to, 1 week the Catholics would be firing all the Anglicans. The next week the Anglicans would be firing the Catholics. And it was quite a bitter time there. Of course, it erupted in Cromwell. But that wasn't until 1660, so you had about 40 years of fighting.
Well, it all goes back to good old King Charles I and his desire to divorce somebody and marry Anne Boleyn.
Oh, you mean Henry? Henry VIII.
Yes.
Henry
yes,
VIII.
I'm sorry.
Henry VIII.
Yes.
And of course, then it erupted
Definitely.
when Elizabeth became queen, and then Charles I became king, and they beheaded him.
Yes.
So that was quite a time, and feelings ran awfully high then. And of course, these people apparently were the brains of the country.
There was an Archbishop Laud or Bishop
Yeah,
Laud or
Bishop
something
Laud,
who was a real persecutor.
he was the archbishop. He's the one that,
Yeah.
he's the one that threw Hooker out. He's the one that threw Eliot out. He's the one that threw Blakeman out of the church.
Because they were in their religion, they felt they wanted to go in the direction of something simpler
Yeah,
than
They were
the
not-
early Anglican Church, which was, to all intents and purposes,
it was the Roman Catholic Church.
the Roman Church.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I say, it's what we call over here the high church. You don't hear about it much now. But when you have the full mass and the bells and the incense, really the Anglicans don't want that. So they didn't go in for it.
It's unfortunate that all through history that the Christian Church has been the center of
The center of all of it.
so much un-Christ-like activity.
No, it's terrible the way they've.
I think anyone hearing cuckoo house is fascinated by that term. I suppose the English love their birds, as do a great many other people. Do you think it may have had cuckoos in the shade trees around it?
It may have. I don't know whether, I haven't read enough yet in Lou's book, whether he's got cuckoo house there. We did bring pictures back of it, but he has got the Nazing Church in there.
Now, Nazing is how close to London? Is it?
About 40 miles.
Uh-huh.
It's
And Little Bedaux is not too
it's
far
about
from
5
there?
miles from Nazing.
5 miles from Nazing.
And
Is
it's
that N-A-Z-I-N-G?
N-A-Z-I-N-G.
And that's a fast-sized city, isn't it?
No, it's a little tiny country town.
Mhm.
You go down 2 streets and you've been through the town.
So,
And the church is fascinating. It's on the end of a country lane, and you drive down it. We couldn't get the bus down. We had one of these regular buses. We had an awfully good young driver. Name is Stephen Thorpe, of Gertrude's people.
yeah.
So he's there, and he said he gets £100 a week to drive these trips around through England. They hire him, and he works for this firm. And so they take him in. We got to know him very well. We had him 5 days with us. And boy, the way he could whip that big thing around. But he couldn't get it down the street to the Nazing Church. So we had to back up and park off on a little side street before he came to the church. And he did. He got it backed around. When we got over to Bedaux, that was another very interesting thing. The house across the street from the Little Bedaux Church was the manor house of Bedaux. Now apparently there's a regular Bedaux and Little Bedaux. The manor house was very big, and we were invited for lunch there. And of course this is all set up by our tour director. And it must have been women from the church came over, and they all had Scottish costumes on, little Scottish caps and jackets and skirts. And as we went in, we were offered wine. We sat at the table, and then somebody knocked, and out comes the lady of the manor. And if you really want to see an exact thought of what an English lady looked like, she wasn't refined or anything. She looked as though she'd just come in off the farm. Her hair hung down straight, a regular country lady. But she was the squire's wife.
To the manor born.
To the manor born. And she had the royal accent. You know, there is a big difference in the accents in England. When you get in the upper class, you begin to hit what they call the royal accent. Words sound entirely different. And then you have a good upper class, the words sound different. Of course, when you go below that, you can't understand them. But it was really fascinating. I say they took us in, seated us, gave us a full, can't remember what we had, full meal, and then dessert. And then the minister got up, made a little speech, and then we adjourned across the street to the Little Bedaux Chapel. And that seated 150. I mean, it wasn't a tiny place, but it was fascinating. And then the question whether Steve would turn the bus around, we decided to walk down the street to the Cuckoo House. It's only 5 or 6 houses down. So it was very interesting.
Certainly a memorable trip that you had. To play back just to see how we sound, and then see. Thank you very much, Val. It has been most interesting. I'm sure you have introduced us to a very important chapter, not only in the history of Stratford, and rather an unknown chapter, but indeed a chapter in the history of New England and, well, let's say the United States. That nucleus of people, famous men at Little Bideau, Cuckoo House, certainly were among the very important founding fathers of our country. Thank you again. So now